Let's go over the difference between a VPAT and an ACR. VPAT stands for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template, and this is a standardized template that, once filled in and completed, creates an ACR, or an Accessibility Conformance Report. So you can see the ACR and VPAT are related, but the ACR is the actual report, whereas the VPAT is the template that we are filling in to create the report. So the VPAT is going to come with instructions to start off with. So the first 10 pages are going to be instructions. And then we get to the actual details section of the VPAT, and that's followed by the accessibility table. So in the details, we're going to include the relevant information surrounding the product or service. And then in the accessibility table, that's where we're actually going to get to the accounting of the accessibility for the product or service. Think of it as a report card. It's a report card, and once we have the ACR, we really have a snapshot of the accessibility for the product or service as of the date that the ACR was issued. So on the screen with me, we have the VPAT template and the ACR side by side. So here we can see that the VPAT provides for all of these details: name of product, the version of the product, report date, product description, contact information, notes, evaluation methods used, applicable standards, guidelines. So we're going to populate all of that information, and at the heading 1 of the VPAT is going to be the company name and then accessibility conformance report, because once this is filled in, it has to be completed. Once it's filled in, completed, then we have the accessibility conformance report. Now, one thing to note is that there are different editions of the VPAT document. So the edition that is on the screen with me is the International Edition. The WCAG edition is quite common. It really just depends on what standards you want to align with for your product or service. And so if you're unsure, then I have another video on which VPAT edition to choose. But the point here is that we have this blank document. We're going to fill it in and complete it. And then we have the resulting ACR. So on the right side of the screen, we have the ACR for Google Drive, and we see these details populated. So for example, the report date is March 28th, 2023. There's a product description, there's the contact information, so there's an email for Google, and so on. But the important part here, the important distinction, is that the ACR is where everything is going to be filled in and completed. And so now we're going to go ahead and tab over to the accessibility table. And I've just got one section from this table. And so you can see that there are 3 columns in the table. The first is the criteria. These are going to be the criteria or requirements, the technical requirements under these technical standards that we've chosen to use. So in the international version of the VPAT, it's going to include all of the standards. It's going to include the WCAG edition of the VPAT, the Section 508 edition of the VPAT, as well as EN 301-549. We're going to include all of those standards and then have all of the criteria in the accessibility table portion. Here we've only got just one screenshot of the accessibility table, so it's just showing a few criteria, but we need to work through these. And the way we're going to do so is with an audit. So we need to have an audit of the digital asset. And once we have the audit, then we can take those findings and include them in the appropriate sections. We'll include the findings in the accessibility table. And so here you can see that the table is sectioned off by criteria. And remember, again, these are the requirements under the technical standards. So that's the first column. The second column is the conformance level. So what level, how does the product or service support the given criteria? The support level can be fully supports, does not support, partially supports, not applicable, and or not evaluated. I won't get into all of the details there, but the point is that you're going to have this conformance level, and that really is, this is the section that really gives us the grades on our report card. And then the remarks and explanations column is where we get more context for those grades. Now, the remarks and explanations column won't be absolutely necessary unless we have either entered does not support or partially supports in the conformance level. But otherwise, it's a good idea to include remarks and explanations just because it shows that attention to detail has been paid. And so if there are more remarks and explanations, it fares well. It just looks better. It reflects nicely upon the accessibility conformance report. So looking over onto the right side of the screen, we have a screenshot of the Google Drive ACR, and we can see that there are criteria that are set out, and then we have a description of the criteria, and then we have the conformance level in the second column. And so here we can see that several criteria are not applicable. There's 1.3.1, which is a WCAG success criterion, information and relationships, partially supports, and then we have the remarks and explanations column, which we can see is filled out for each of these criteria. And on the partially supports, there's actually a more elaborate remarks and explanations entry. But this is the difference. We've gone over some details. We haven't gone over everything, but now you know that the VPAT is simply the templated document. It's a standardized document, and we use this to create an accessibility conformance report, which gives us an accounting of the accessibility of a product or service, so that once we have an ACR, this is something that sellers can provide to procurement agents, so that the procurement agents can evaluate the accessibility of a product or service more easily. And it's not an audit, but it does give us, like I said, it's like a report card. We get a snapshot of the accessibility. An audit is going to contain more details, but now with this document, the procurement agent will be able to easily and quickly evaluate the accessibility and easily compare the accessibility of two different sellers, so their products or services, compare those products or services accessibility easily against one another. So that is the difference. If you need help with VPAT documentation, I will include a link to accessible.org. I will include a link to our services page as well as our pricing page, and I will include a contact link if you would like to contact me directly about VPAT services. So all of those resources will be included in the description for this video.